The day doing more stopped working. You try the right things, longer walks, later nights to stay in the loop, powering through low energy. And yet sleep turns light. Memory misplaces names. Afternoons sag. Balance hesitates. Independence feels a step farther away. Here's the quiet mystery. After midlife, the nervous system stops rewarding volume and starts rewarding rhythm. The old math of more equals better no longer adds up. Your small test for today is simple. Before your next plan, pause at a doorway and take 3 long exhales, longer out than in. If your shoulders settle and your jaw softens, choose the quieter option. If your breath lifts you, go. But protect a gentle landing later. That single habit, practiced daily, becomes a hinge for deeper sleep and steadier mornings. This series is a promise, not a scold. Across healthy aging research, 2 patterns keep showing up. Quality connection beats quantity, and recovery beats overdrive. People who apply the shifts below often sleep heavier, recall details more easily, walk steadier, and feel more independent by evening. Those who do not may keep burning fuel that doesn't move them forward. I'll show you why and what to do now. Thing 1 that stops making sense. Out-hustling your own body. Why this matters after 50 and 60. Stress chemistry lingers longer, muscles rebuild more slowly, and the brain prioritizes predictability over thrill. Many geriatric clinicians and sleep researchers highlight the value of consistent routines, morning light, and strength plus balance training over endless busy work. The goal isn't to shrink your life. It's to right-size it so energy returns. Irene, 72, in Portland, kept a calendar that looked like a patchwork quilt. Pilates at dawn, volunteer shift, late dinner with friends because saying no felt rude. By midnight, her kitchen smelled faintly of lemon soap and rain. She stacked dishes with careful hands that trembled at the edges. She slept in splinters. One Thursday, she tried a different arithmetic. First, she set a hard boundary around bedtime, lights softer after dinner. Next, she moved her favorite visit to brunch hours when her mood was brightest. Then, she paired every outing with a recovery ritual, a lamp, a book, the slow weight of a blanket across her knees. Finally, she added 2 small strength moves to her mornings. After 2 weeks, she woke before the alarm, remembered her grandson's school project without checking the note, and took curbs without catching her breath. The house felt friendlier. Her body stopped whispering careful at every turn. What this means for a listener over 50, trading more for rhythm, often deepens sleep and steadies energy. First, claim a gentle curfew for light and conversations. Next, place morning light in your eyes soon after waking, clouds count. Then, keep your best people at your best hour. Finally, pair each social plan with planned recovery. The benefit is a nervous system that cooperates. Ignoring this may be associated with shallow sleep and the kind of fatigue that coffee cannot solve. If this landed, tell me one word for how your body feels after choosing the quieter option. If you haven't subscribed to Senior Wisdom and Wellness, this is your invitation. Simple, science-informed practices for healthy aging, exactly when you need them. Thing 2 that stops making sense. Chasing youth workouts and skipping power. Why this matters after 50 and 60. Walking is wonderful for endurance, but it does little for the power that gets you up from chairs and protects balance. Many physical therapists teaching senior wellness prioritize sit-to-stands, step-ups, gentle rows, and heel-to-toe balance. The promise is not big muscles, it's resilient daily life. Quick pointer for today. Time yourself standing from a sturdy chair without using your hands. If it feels wobbly, that's your new compass. Ethan, 60, in Denver, loved long strolls but dreaded stairs. In the grocery store, he leaned on the cart handle. The rubber smelled faintly like old pennies. He decided to test a new routine. First, he placed a chair by the kitchen counter. Next, he practiced standing up and sitting down slowly, touching the counter only for safety. Then, he added counter push-ups while soup simmered. Finally, he walked the hallway heel to toe. 3 weeks later, he carried 2 bags with an easy grip and stood tall at the crosswalk without scouting for a pole to hold. What this means for a listener over 50, Small doses of power and balance often turn chores into confidence. Benefits show up as steadier curbs, easier toilets and car seats, and a lower chance of stumbles. Ignoring this may lead to slower walking speed, which is often associated with reduced independence later on. Thing 3 that stops making sense: eating like it's still your 30s. Why this matters after 50. The body asks for steadier protein, colorful plants, and calmer timing. Erratic meals and late-night snacking tug on sleep and fog memory the next day. Healthy aging isn't about perfection. It's about fueling muscle and mood. Quick action now. At each meal, aim for a palm's worth of protein you enjoy. If afternoon crashes soften within a week, you're on track. Rosa, 54, near San Antonio, graded papers through lunch and then craved sweets at 3. The classroom chalk smelled dry. Her patience ran thin. She packed food like a kind parent. First, she added a boiled egg and tomatoes for mid-morning. Next, she chose a hearty soup for lunch. Then, she kept almonds and an apple for the long stretch. Finally, she dimmed evening lights and stopped nibbling once the lamp was on. Within days, she stopped snapping at her brother on the phone and slept heavier. What this means for a listener over 50: steady meals lower mood swings and help sleep land. Benefits include clearer mornings and fewer energy cliffs. Ignoring this may be associated with blood sugar highs and lows that make memory feel slippery. Thing 4 that stops making sense: equating more friends with better health. Why this matters after 50 and 60. Meaningful ties protect health. Crowded calendars do not. Loneliness can burden the body, but so can overextending. The sweet spot is warm, low-drama connection and planned solitude for repair. Quick pointer. After any social time, ask your body 2 questions. Do I breathe easier? And do I like myself around them? If yes, keep it. If not, reduce with kindness. Marla, 68, in Minneapolis, joined 3 clubs and felt lonelier by bedtime. She tried a shift. First, she kept the book club that left her laughing. Next, she trimmed the committee that churned conflict. Then, she placed a weekly porch tea with one friend on her calendar like medicine. Finally, she scheduled a quiet evening after every gathering. The porch boards warmed under her feet. The kettle's soft whistle felt like a blessing. What this means for a listener over 50: choosing quality and recovery often lifts mood more than chasing variety. Benefits include lighter evenings and steadier attention. Ignoring this may be associated with irritability and restless sleep. Thing 5 that stops making sense: worshiping late nights. Why this matters after 50. Circadian rhythms grow touchier. Blue light and late meals keep the brain on guard. Healthy aging favors bright mornings and soft evenings. Quick action tonight. Choose one lamp and a warm drink in the last hour before bed. If you wake less in the night, your body approves. Ken, 70, outside Boston, loved news shows after dark. The television flicker painted his living room cold. He moved his routine. First, he stepped outside at sunrise for a few quiet minutes. Next, he set a lamp-only rule after dinner. Then, he saved shows for late afternoon. Finally, he kept the bedroom dark and cool. A week later, he said, "Sleep feels heavier, like a quilt I can trust." What this means for a listener over 50: morning light plus evening dimming often restores sleep and next-day energy. Benefits: fewer early wake-ups, calmer mornings. Ignoring this may be associated with light, fractured sleep. Thing 6 that stops making sense: pushing through pain instead of adjusting the environment. Why this matters after 50 and 60. Small home tweaks prevent big stumbles. Independence grows from frictionless days, clear walkways, reachable shelves, friendly lighting. Quick pointer. Look at the floor you walk most. If a rug corners up, fix it or release it. Instruction: the 5-minute safety sweep. First, start at your bedroom doorway and walk the path you take in the dark. Notice cords, loose rugs, and wobbly chairs. Next, place a soft light source at knee height for night trips, like a motion night light. Then, make daily use items live between shoulder and knee height to avoid risky reaches. Finally, add a non-slip mat where water lives and a small table by the entry for keys so you aren't bending with bags in hand. Joanna, 66, in Cardiff, kept tripping on a hopeful rug. She rolled it up, installed a motion light that glowed like moon milk at her feet, and put her heavy mixing bowl on a lower shelf. She said, "I stopped holding my breath on stairs." What this means for a listener over 50, small environment changes often protect balance and lower daily strain. Benefits include easier mornings and fewer near misses. Ignoring this may be associated with preventable falls. Thing 7 that stops making sense, treating the mind like a storage closet. Why this matters after 50. Memory loves meaning, repetition, and sleep. Multitasking shreds attention. Names slip not because you're broken, but because you're busy. Quick action. Carry a pocket card for names and important details, and review it once before bed. Amir, 61, in Toronto, joined a walking group. He linked each new name to a visual cue and wrote it down. First, he looked at eyes and repeated the name. Next, he paired it with something kind, blue scarf, steady voice. Then, he wrote it on the card. Finally, he reviewed the card as the kettle warmed. At the next walk, he greeted everyone correctly. He felt the group's shoulders lower around him. What this means for a listener over 50. Meaningful cues plus quick review, often steady recall. Benefits include easier conversations and less social anxiety. Ignoring this may be associated with the false belief that memory is gone, when it is often just overloaded. Thing 8 that stops making sense. Saving joy for later. Why this matters after 50 and 60. Joy is not dessert. It is fuel for the work of living. Small, scheduled delights create energy to handle appointments, caregiving, and the news. Quick pointer. Choose one repeatable joy, a 10-minute sketch by a window, a song with breakfast, light gardening, and guard it like medicine. Lionel, 75, in Chicago, began photographing the train line at dusk. The rails looked like silver thread. The camera strap felt solid against his wrist. City air carried a clean hint of rain on stone. He returned home satisfied, which softened his bedtime and brightened his mornings. What this means for a listener over 50. Planned joy often improves sleep and patience more than collapsing into screens. Benefits include lighter mood, steadier focus, and friendlier evenings. Ignoring joy may be associated with a flat day that feels twice as heavy as it needs to. Here's your gentle nudge. If one of these 8 made you sit up a little straighter, share a single word in the comments. Lights, protein, boundaries, or your own. And if you're not yet part of this community, subscribe so the next piece of senior wellness meets you where you are. The truth is simple and brave. After 70, you are allowed to change the rules. And when you do, the day changes back. When old ambitions stop fitting new peace. There's another thing that stops making sense after 70. Chasing the old version of yourself. The one who was always proving something. The one who mistook exhaustion for success. You don't need to earn your rest anymore. You've already paid for it with decades of showing up when it mattered most. Why this matters after 50 and 60. Stress hormones take longer to calm, and constant striving blurs memory and balance. But there's something quietly revolutionary about redefining ambition, not as achieving, but as maintaining peace. A retired lawyer named Paul, 71, from Vermont, once told me, "I spent my 50s terrified of becoming irrelevant. Then I realized I was already free." He stopped forcing himself to fill every minute. He started walking slower, without earbuds, just to hear his own steps echo through the trees. The first few weeks were uncomfortable, like quitting a drug. But after that, he noticed time stretching again. Food tasted richer. Mornings weren't battles. What this means for a listener over 50. The shift from proving to living often restores energy and reduces anxiety more effectively than supplements or slogans ever could. First, begin your day without a task, a minute of stillness before coffee. Next, release one obligation each week that exists only from habit. Then, say yes to something joyful and useless, feeding birds, sketching clouds, humming old songs. Finally, forgive yourself for not being endlessly productive. When you stop running toward relevance, you discover that peace was waiting at your natural pace all along. The strange illusion of catching up. After 70, catching up stops making sense too. The news cycle, technology, trends, they multiply faster than anyone can keep pace. Many older adults exhaust themselves trying to stay current instead of staying connected. But nobody needs you to memorize every new app. They need you to remain present, steady, interested, calm. Why this matters for aging well. Constant comparison fuels stress chemistry. Calm focus supports memory retention, digestion, and heart rhythm. Gloria, 69, in Los Angeles, tried to keep up with her grandchildren online. TikTok, new slang, smart home gadgets. She spent hours squinting at tutorials. Her shoulders cramped, her breath shortened, and her confidence shrank. One evening her granddaughter said, "Grandma, I don't need you to understand my apps. I need you to make your apple pie." That moment cracked something open. Gloria deleted half her subscriptions, went outside, and planted herbs instead. The scent of rosemary on her fingers felt like a handshake with her younger self. What this means for a listener over 50, staying engaged doesn't mean chasing every update. It means choosing where your attention truly adds value. First, pick one or two technologies that genuinely serve you. Maybe video calls, photo sharing, or health tracking. Next, schedule screen breaks like meals. Then, spend that time on sensory living. The feel of sunlight, the smell of dinner cooking, the sound of laughter. Finally, trade catching up for catching breath. Peace of mind is not outdated. It's just offline. The myth of aging gracefully. After 70, the phrase itself starts to sound like an expectation wrapped in compliments. Graceful aging often hides the demand to stay thin, cheerful, and uncomplaining. But real grace after 70 looks different. It looks like honesty. Why this matters? The emotional load of pretending drains the same energy your body needs to repair and rest. Studies on healthy aging highlight the value of emotional authenticity. Acknowledging feelings of fatigue, grief, or loneliness reduces their power. Elaine, 78, from Bristol, used to apologize for everything. For moving slowly, for needing help, for repeating a story. One afternoon at her book club, she said, "I don't need to be graceful today. I just need to be me." The laughter that followed was warm, not polite. That night, she slept without the usual knot behind her ribs. What this means for a listener over 50, dropping perfection often lifts physical tension and deepens social bonds. First, notice when you apologize for existing. Next, replace sorry with thank you for waiting. Then, when your body aches, name it without shame. It's not weakness. It's wisdom written in tissue. Finally, surround yourself with people who meet your truth with gentleness, not judgment. Real grace isn't quiet or polished. It's alive, sometimes messy, and beautifully human. The need to always explain yourself. You spend decades justifying every choice, to your boss, your partner, your children, even to strangers. But after 70, it stops making sense to over-explain peace. Why this matters? The brain thrives when energy isn't wasted on defense. Anxiety from constant justification often keeps heart rate elevated and rest shallow. Simpler words, fewer explanations, and gentle boundaries can return hours of calm to your days. Alan, 70, in Dublin, decided to stop defending his routine. When his grown son teased him for eating early and going to bed by 9, Alan smiled and said, "That's when my body thanks me most." The conversation ended. The respect remained. What this means for a listener over 50, self-trust grows stronger when you choose comfort over approval. First, pause before explaining, breathe out, and ask yourself, does this person need a reason or just an answer? Next, practice short statements rooted in self-respect. That works for me. I'm done for today. I'm resting now. Then, resist the urge to fill silence. Finally, enjoy the quiet power that follows. Peace does not require permission. It only requires consistency. When giving too much becomes taking from yourself. Generosity is beautiful until it empties the giver. After 70, endless caretaking, volunteering, or emotional labor can quietly chip away at physical energy. Healthy aging means balancing giving with receiving. Why this matters. Chronic overgiving often elevates stress hormones and shortens deep sleep phases. Balanced kindness restores vitality and mood. Margaret, 73, in Seattle, spent every morning helping neighbors, groceries, rides, phone calls. One afternoon, she tripped on her porch because her legs trembled from exhaustion. That evening, she sat with a cup of tea, watching rain slide down the window. She decided to have her help. Mondays and Fridays became her rest days. She told her friends gently, "I'm refilling the well." They understood. Within weeks, her laughter returned to its old volume. What this means for a listener over 50, sustainable giving keeps compassion alive without draining your core. First, write down everything you do for others in a week. Next, circle one task you can delegate or pause. Then, replace that time with something that restores you. Reading, stretching, a warm bath, or simply nothing. Finally, remember, a rested giver gives better. You are not selfish for resting. You're strategic about kindness. The noise of endless advice. Paradoxically, after 70, the world floods you with more advice than ever on diet, supplements, brain games, or how to stay young. But too many opinions cause paralysis. Why this matters? Decision fatigue is real. Each new rule you chase drains focus and weakens motivation. What truly sustains health after 50 and 60 are the basics: steady movement, balanced meals, meaningful ties, good sleep, and daily calm. Ralph, 74, in Toronto, had 12 supplement bottles and 3 fitness plans. He felt worse, not better. His doctor told him, "Pick 3 things you'll actually keep doing." Ralph chose walking, stretching, and morning light. Within a month, his digestion improved, and his blood pressure settled lower than it had in years. What this means for a listener over 50, consistency beats complexity. First, narrow your routines until they feel gentle enough to last. Next, measure success by steadiness, not novelty. Then, when new advice comes, ask, does it simplify my life or clutter it? Finally, remind yourself that the best wellness plan is the one your body loves to repeat. Peaceful health isn't built on perfection. It's built on patterns that fit. Time itself changes shape. Perhaps the strangest thing that stops making sense after 70 is the old way of measuring time as something to conquer. You stop racing toward Fridays. You start noticing how light falls through curtains, how tea cools, how slow mornings taste like luxury. Why this matters? Mindfulness lowers stress, supports immunity, and strengthens emotional stability. Time well noticed is time well lived. Agnes, 76, in Maine, used to fill every hour. One autumn, she decided to measure days differently, not by achievements, but by sensory memories. One day smelled like cinnamon. Another sounded like rain on tin. She kept a small notebook by her bed and wrote one line before sleep. Today felt green and calm. That notebook became her most healing therapy. What this means for a listener over 50, when you shift from counting years to inhabiting moments, life expands again. First, end each day with one sensory memory, a color, a taste, a sound. Next, keep those pages somewhere you can reread on rough days. Then, notice patterns. What colors repeat when you feel well? Finally, design more of those. You cannot add more years by worrying, but you can fill the ones you have with deeper minutes. The quiet revolution. Here's the hidden truth behind all 8 things, and the few more we uncovered. Aging well isn't about resisting change. It's about editing what no longer fits and treasuring what does. You become a curator of your own energy, your own peace. Those who embrace this shift, who trade noise for rhythm, guilt for boundaries, and shoulds for serenity, don't shrink with age. They deepen. Their homes feel calmer, their laughter warmer, their mornings lighter. And for those who still think slowing down means giving up, remember, calm is not surrender. It's precision. It's choosing where your remaining time lands. Take a slow breath now. Feel how your chest rises, how your shoulders drop. That's the sound of life rebalancing itself, quietly, mercifully, wisely. Thank you for listening, for reading, for caring about the shape of your own days. If this message found you at the right moment, please subscribe to Senior Wisdom and Wellness, where we share calm, evidence-based reflections on living well after 50, 60, and beyond. And before you go, leave one small comment below. Which thing are you ready to let go of after 70? Because sometimes letting go is the real secret to holding on.